helping the economy is essential to any policy that we pursue. I want to talk a little bit about cap and trade, as is in the President's proposed budget, or as Mr. Brown referred it to as cap and tax. I want to throw some facts out there that a number of different groups have put out, and I think there's pretty much a consensus. Many, including the EPA and many others, estimate that it would be a decline in GDP if cap and tax is implemented. A number of groups estimate that it would be a loss of millions of jobs. And again, a number of different groups. Just about everyone understands, and there's a consensus that cap and tax or cap and trade will increase electricity rates. You mentioned that yourself a little while ago, on American families and American businesses by anywhere between 44 to 129%, which, by the way, is way above what the President is proposing to subsidize some families in his budget. So they're way above that. Gasoline price increases between 61 cents to $2.53 per gallon. Natural gas cost increases between 108% and 146%. To sum it up best, you know, you're the President's own OMB director, who used to be at CBL, stated September 18th, quote, "Costs will be passed along to the consumers in the form of higher prices for energy." I don't think that's debatable. Again, that's Mr. Orszag. He also stated that a 15% cut in CO2 emissions, which, by the way, is 80% less than is sought in the President's budget, would be an average annual household cost of $1,300. These are substantial numbers. So these are some of the facts. Now, you stated in your testimony in answering the questions, by the way, which I think you're right, that the U.S., by the way, can't do this alone. Obviously, China being the big 800-pound gorilla as far as CO2 emissions. Associated Press today has an article where they quoted the Chinese Director of Climate Change, the Department of Climate Change, saying that China will not be charged for that, that the U.S. importers of products made in China that produce high CO2s are going to have to pay the cost, in essence. So look, in essence, like you mentioned, you know, that it's good to be cool to be energy efficient. Clearly, quoting another one of those sayings, China just said no. One more time. This is the same China that just recently harassed the U.S. military ship, the same China that murders dissenters. We know who we're dealing with. So here's the question. That being the case, and you stated in other words, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that obviously we can't do it alone, China being the big player. Will this administration then change the policy regarding cap and trade or cap and tax, or will it go forward regardless of those facts on how it will impact the economy, and particularly if China says, nope, you know, we're not going to play, and how will policy be guided by the costs on the U.S. economy and the U.S. family, regardless, because again, as I said, that partial subsidy just won't cut it. The numbers are there. They're pretty plain. So will this administration, and will you look at all those facts, and are you willing then to take a step back and say, we're not going to do this because the price is too high, the economic price is too high, and China just won't play?
Well,
China and others, I guess, too. And not only China. I guess China is the big one, but there are a lot of others that...
Well, there are two actually 800-pound gorillas when it comes to carbon emissions. It's China and the U.S. I think the two countries together, China's recently passed the United States, but those two countries emit approximately half of all the carbon in the world. I don't, you know, my understanding of the numbers of the costs are far less. I do know the IPC and also IPCC in the latest report, and also the Stern Review report that Nicholas Stern chaired. Those two reports estimate, in order to hold carbon emissions down to a level which the climate scientists feel is prudent, risk management is somewhere between 1% and 2% of GDP. Now, the cost of 1 or 2% of GDP is not insignificant by a long shot. That's a lot of money. But then you have to weigh that against what could possibly happen if we did business as usual. And so then it becomes an issue of what those risks, the potential risks could be. And while one can't say with 100% certainty that such and such will happen. It's again talking about probabilities.
I'm sorry, sir, but you do know, but we can say with certainty the cost of the economy. I mean, that we can say.
That's true.
Okay.
So this is a risk management in the following sense. One can't say with certainty that your house will burn down. In fact, in most cases, your house does not burn down, and yet we all have fire insurance because it's part of that. Because should disaster strike, it's very important. So, let's pretend there's let's say an 80% certainty that the western part of the United States will lose a lot of its pine forests, and there would be less storage of less snowpack, therefore less storage of water. The economic cost of that could be much higher, would be much higher. And so it's not 99% certain, but say it's 80% certain. Then we as a country will have to decide whether we want to pay this extra money, and it is real money to invest. And so that's really the issue that I.
But again, how about the issue of China saying no?
China saying no to what?
To them paying for. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. They're basically saying no. The United States has to pay for our emissions.
I think
cost.
It's very important that all countries, developing countries and developed countries, start to limit their carbon.
But if they say no, do we continue to pursue this policy, or do we not?
I think I'm actually optimistic that China, because China realizes that the consequences of climate change are very real to their country as well. The economic cost.
But if they say no. But if they say no. That's my question.
We talked about, in terms of international trade, of adjusting duties as a way, okay? Because, again, we don't want to disadvantage our industries.